Let's introduce, or Dorothy? Who's in charge? Alice?
Alice. Alice.
Alice, you may introduce.
Sure, I would be glad to.
Okay.
Dan Polishuk and his wife Ginger have been around for many years that I know of. They came from Denver, at least Dan did. And they have done many years of research on loons. And they live up at Loon Lake. And I am really anxious for them to come give us a presentation on their loons and the loon research. I would like you to do it when we get back in a large arena so that you could have a really nice presentation rather than on our computer screens. So hopefully, maybe in the spring or next fall, we'll keep up with you and maybe we can do that.
Great, great.
So he's a wonderful wildlife photographer and he's going to be a great judge for us. He's judged before, but it's been a while. So he judges out at the Valley Club quite often, I think. All right.
Yes, thank you, Alice. Appreciate the fine words there. We will start our competition this evening. I can add a few things to the introduction that Alice provided. We have been active out in the Valley Camera Club until we moved out to Loon Lake in 1999. And then because that made things about 35 or 40 miles away to both camera clubs, we'd be less active in participating. But we still love nature photography and we still do a lot of it. In fact, it's our consuming passion whenever we have available time. So thanks for that, Alice. In the past, I've conducted nature photography tours in Africa, in Canada on polar bears, in Costa Rica, and throughout all of the national parks in the American West. And I'd like to say that Ginger and I have been doing research on common loons since 1996 in Washington. And we are doing probably a leading role in the conservation of that species in the state of Washington. And from our efforts with that, we have been the exclusive photographers for 3 loon books that have been published by Willow Creek Press. So I'm ready to start with the judging tonight in digital general color. And I think I have to click on share screen down the bottom.
Okay, go ahead and share your screen. Okay, so our first entry for tonight in digital color is, are having fun yet?
Well, this image captures action very well. The subjects are both extremely well in focus, and you can see both eyes of the subjects. In fact, all 3 there. And a lot of times in action photography, especially with wildlife and with situations like this, eyes become hidden. So when you make your selections from your motor drive burst, of course, you want to pick out when you can see the face of the subjects. And this image does that very well. The dust that's raised from all of this violent action, I think, is a special enhancement of the image. And I just can't imagine doing something like this. The image has very high impact. It's perfectly framed.
Yeah.
There are no distractive elements to the great composition. The lighting looks to be either under cloudy conditions or perhaps inside an arena. And both of those situations, of course, require Oh, very nice. So I've been talking to no one.
Only for the last 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay. So, did you hear any commentary on this image?
Yeah, you were talking about the lighting, about cloudy or arena.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll pick up from there. I think this image could slightly be improved by adding a small bit of contrast. This is a small negative critique on an otherwise very powerful composition. And I have scored this image composition 5, impact 5, and technical expertise 5 as well. I'm not sure how to advance there. Oh, sorry, went too far. Here we go.
Dennis, are you muted?
I can't hear Dennis.
Oh yes, sorry, I was muted. Sorry. So I just announced Are You Having Fun Yet by Maxie Adams, 15 points.
Very good.
Okay, so our next entry is Are You Looking at Me?
So this image shows us a fine 3 or 4 year old bull elk, and it's looking directly at the photographer, hence the name, Are You Looking at Me? So that title is very well chosen. The subject is perfectly in focus, and the choice of the vertical format here, I think, works very well. There are some distractive elements in the image, however. The foreground snow there, as we can see on the bottom, precludes us from seeing the lower part of the legs of the bull elk. And the collection of the other random elk in the background do not contribute in a supportive way to the composition. So I have scored this particular image composition 2, impact 3, and technical expertise 2.
Are You Looking at Me by Lori Pence, 7 points.
Our next image is a very fine one, and you can provide us the name there, Dennis.
This is Christmas, Then Candy.
So I think this is a beautiful rendition of high dynamic range photography. And this image has really high impact as I look at it. I checked Google, and Google tells me that this particular candy store is located on Howard Street in Omaha, Nebraska. One of my old stomping grounds. I got one of my degrees at Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska. So visited Omaha frequently. So the title of the composition, of course, is Christmas Then Candy, which is somewhat of a mystery to me because the vegetation shows that this is a summer scene. But anyway, note how well the detail is preserved in the highlights of the bricks on the street, of the shaded area in the sidewalk, the shaded foliage on the building side. And at the same time, we can see that the bright areas still maintain detail. So it's a very good application of high dynamic range photography. The amount of color saturation and the color balance are rendered well. And this image to me suggests someone that is contemplating going inside to get some delectables. But as you can see from the slenderness, that person hasn't gone in there very often. So I like how the red umbrella there matches the red of the awnings of the windows, how the green foliage matches the green of the sign. All of those are complementary features about the image. Technical qualities are very good. I think perhaps there's one thing we might consider, and that is to eliminate part of the sky. The sky is very bright, especially in the upper left there. And perhaps a different camera position and slightly different cropping might let us zoom or might let us see the actual subject material in a stronger way. But I've scored this one very high. I suggest that the composition is a 4, impact is 5, and technical expertise is 5.
Christmas, Then Candy by Terry Hamilton, 14 points. Next entry is Dick.
Well, dik-diks are animals that are small antelopes in the eastern part and the southern part of Africa. And this is a very small animal here that we're looking at. They're less than 2 feet tall. And they're almost always seen in brush or near brush where they can escape because they're small and there's a large number of predators that chase them around frequently. Their name comes from a noise that they make when they're alarmed. It somehow sounds like dick. We can tell that this is a male because of these small horns that it has on its head. And I've attempted different times to photograph dik-diks, and I've never come away with an image that looks this great. I love how it's all perfectly in focus. The background is essentially non-distractive. There's great depth of field. The animal is quite centered in the frame, but the body is going to the left and the face is going slightly to the right. So, you know, perhaps putting it directly in the center is okay. I like this image very much. It probably could use just a slight enhancement on exposure, although I think it's very close, within 1/3 of an f-stop. I judged all of these entries, by the way, to let all of you know, on my iMac, which has a 5K screen, a Retina screen. And so all of my commentary is derived from viewing the images on that particular screen. So I've scored this one very high as well. This for composition is a 5. The technical expertise is a 4. And the impact is also a 5. So 5, 5, 4 on this one.
Dick by Rosemary Biziar, 14 points. Next entry is Early Morning Frost.
Well, this beautiful scene looks similar to what Ginger and I see every morning when we get up. We see frosty conditions as we look out over Loon Lake. But I really enjoy this image. I can say I don't remember ever seeing another image in competition where the subject was a dock and a walkway. But we have one here, and it forms a really nice lead-in line to the subject as we see the walkway there. The image seems to be focused directly on the bright sunlit spot on the taller vegetation in the foreground. And then focus falls off just a little bit as we go on through the scene. And I think the depth of field could have been enhanced by focusing perhaps about in this range somewhere instead of right here, which is quite close to the camera. So by focusing a little farther back and perhaps using a smaller aperture, the background would be sharper. Some of the vegetation over here on the left would also be sharper. But nevertheless, this is a very pleasing image. The exposure has been handled very well. And perhaps there's HDR techniques involved here because we see a lot of detail in the foreground here, which is mainly in the shade. I scored this one quite high as well. Composition 5, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
Early Morning Frost by Donald Larson, 13 points. Falling Leaves.
Well, this composite to me demonstrates a high amount of technical expertise. How all this is done is just an absolute mystery to me. It's not wildlife photography, so I'm challenged at really understanding what I'm looking at here and especially how it was created. Ginger and I spent a while analyzing this composite and the way the shadows are rendered differently and the way the positions are different, plus the background. It took a lot of creative energy and creative success to make it as well looking as it is. I have one negative comment on the merger here between these two leaves. That's a little unfortunate. Otherwise, perhaps just a little more saturation on the leaves or vibrance, whichever you prefer. And maybe we could crop just a little bit off on the right-hand side here. As it is, all of the leaves are very well centered, and perhaps just taking a little bit off on the right side might enhance the image. I've scored this composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
Falling Leaves by Terry Hamilton, 12 points. Green Heron.
Well, this is an image of one of our favorite birds to photograph. It's a water bird, our specialty, and this is a very fine image. I like very much how everything we are looking at here is in focus. All of the parts of the green heron are sharply in focus. It's in the shade, however, and a lot of opening up of the shadows has been done here to allow us to be able to see the detail as we have it here. Unfortunately, what happens then, if you open up the shadows, you can have some complications with brighter areas that are actually sunlit, such as over here in the right and behind the bird here on the left. I think also that some of the features in the background here are distractive. The spider webs I'm kind of ambivalent about. I don't think they're entirely distractive, but I don't think they necessarily complement the image either. So I'm going to just kind of pretend like they're not there. One of the faults that I can see in this composition is that there's a rather high camera angle, which is unfortunate. And if you look at this image, it's down near the water, which is an impossible place to get down to. So I'm not going to count off much in a negative way because of that. I've graded this composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
Green Heron by Beverly Hardin, 9 points. Horse Eye.
Well, this image gives us a great amount of magnification as we can see all of this unusual detail. Depth of field in the image is extensive. It renders the eyelashes and the eye detail very sharp. So there's no question at all about what the subject is in this particular instance. We are looking right at it, and I guess you could say it's looking directly at us as well. I found myself trying to determine what the reflection in the eye was here. It looks like stair steps, but I'm not sure. Nevertheless, it's a very pleasing image. Perhaps you might suggest that we move the eye over to this part of the compositional frame. However, then we would see more of the unsharp information over here, more to the front of the face of the horse. So we will leave it where it is, as it is, and as such, it has compositional strengths. I've graded this one composition 4, impact 4, technical expertise 4.
Horse Eye by Don Burnell, 12 points. In the Heather.
Well, here we see a really beautiful mountain scene. It's got great compositional elements as we look at it. When we examine it closely, we see that the clump of flowers here in the foreground is the sharpest part of the image. And as we go on through the image, we see that focus falls off. So depth of field is suffering here. And if you use this field of view in this situation, a proper place to focus would be out somewhere in this vicinity. And if you are adept at checking field of view, depth of field on your camera, you can check that. However, usually the viewfinder gets dark and you don't gain much information from doing that anyway. But as I look at this image, I see some really interesting features back here. I think these have the most interesting parts of the composition. And I might suggest that if you use a slightly more telephoto lens, perhaps you could move in and we could crop differently here and come away with an entirely different image, which I think is stronger compositionally. Here we can have foreground material like this, and we will eliminate that bright talus slope on the right, which was of no complementary information anyway. So I really like the arrangement of information here. I think it's a slightly stronger composition. Looks like somebody cut off this tree at some period in time to make it so it wasn't obstructing the scenic photography of the area. But anyway, I would prefer this composition. So I've scored this particular image, composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
In the Heather by Harvey Brown, 9 points. Into the Light.
Well, this is a real intriguing scene in composition. I enjoy looking at this. I love the moody nature of the clouds, and of course, the spot of light that we see that's leading us into the scene, hence the name Into the Light. And I like this a lot. I like the framing material on both sides. I think it's unfortunate that some of the vegetation and tree stumps that are out here kind of block our view of seeing that light information here. And I'm not sure what to do about that. I would prefer seeing more of the mountain directly lit than just this particular area. But you can see the technical qualities otherwise are very good. There's sharp focus from the very bottom all the way to the top of the peak in the background there. So small aperture was used, and correct focus techniques perhaps somewhere in here were utilized, and probably a small aperture. And what you might consider doing in the future is bringing along a chainsaw, cutting all of this down through here. And that would give you a great view, an unimpeded view of the mountain in the background. But I say that in jest. I enjoy the composition very much. I give it a 4 for composition, a 4 for impact, and a 4 for technical expertise.
Into the Light by Steve Whitaker, 12 points. Night Ferry.
Well, Google informs me that this particular ferry is in Croatia, and that it can carry 500 passengers and 44 automobiles and travel at 13 knots. Just a little bit of side information on what we're looking at here. I love this composition. It's just incredibly strong. I love the verticalness of the ferry. I like the sunlit clouds in the background at sunset or at sunrise. It's most likely sunset. I like how we can just see the people both inside the ferry and standing out in front of it. And I don't know if HDR techniques were used here to capture this image as it is, but we see everything in great detail. There's not a single thing that I would change about this image. I love all compositional elements of it, and the maker has done a great job. So I score this one, composition 5, impact 5, and technical expertise 4.
Night Ferry by Lori Carlton Smith, 14 points. October Road.
Well, this is another image that has high impact. I love the dramatic clouds that we see in the sky and the strong diagonal lead-in line that the roadway presents. I have some issue with the bank on the left here. It's quite large as it is shown here, and kind of takes away from some of the background features of the Palouse that we otherwise could see more strongly. Especially it dominates over the row of conifers here. So I'm suggesting perhaps standing on top of the car here to get a slightly different view, moving to the right onto the roadway a little bit farther, to minimize the verticalness of the bank here on the left, which I don't think is complementary to the rest of the scene. Everything else I'm looking at here is very strong. I enjoy how the highway leads into the scene here, and it makes an overall composition with high impact. So October Road gets 4 for composition, 4 for impact, and technical expertise 4.
Sorry, I was muted over there. October Road by Dennis Smith, 12 points. Next is orange on black.
Well, this composition has a strong diagonal line from lower left to upper right, as you can see here. I like that part of it. I love the color of the photograph very much. I think it's a little underexposed, and we're then taken away from some of the detail that we might see in the blossoms here. And also that cuts down on the vividness of the blossoms. The sharpest focus is actually on this blossom here, which I think is a different flower type. And that kind of goes right through here, and including these petals, and then it falls off pretty quickly. So we're not looking at classic how-to flower photography here, which suggests bright illumination, perfect focus, large depth of field, and typically a lack of cutting petals away. And we see that's done here quite readily. And unfortunately, this blossom in the background here is cut at an unfortunate position here in the frame. So some strengths on this composition, and then also some distractions. So on this one, I'm giving composition a 2, impact a 2, and technical expertise a 2.
Orange on black by Nancy Wagner, 6 points. Ready for a clean sweep.
Well, I appreciate the choice of the vertical format here. That fits very well with the subject that we're looking at. I enjoy the lighting that we see here, and the subject material is very striking and very intriguing. And I've never seen brooms made this way, but I'm sure they work very well. I see a little fall off of focus here in the near foreground, and I think that's a little unfortunate. I don't mind that as it goes away. That's, that's normal as we view things, but we typically prefer to have the foreground sharp, especially on vertical compositions. I like how this performs a strong diagonal here from lower right toward upper left of the main subject. It's a little unfortunate that we have these items over here on the upper right-hand part of the frame. I think they're distractive, and they're not complementary to the scene. I don't know of a way to get rid of them other than pushing everything to a different direction or moving things. So that's just a minor negative comment on that. I score this one, composition 4, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
Ready for a clean sweep by Barbara Murray, 10 points. Round the first barrel.
Well, this is another rodeo image that shows extremely high action, and this is another one that I enjoy very much. Everything is tack sharp in focus, and it's a little bit of a mystery to me to see how everything is so in focus and yet tack sharp. Oftentimes when we go for a slightly smaller aperture to get things more in focus, we come away with motion blur. So this particular photographer has likely used a camera that allows the use of high ISO values to get both adequate depth of field and a shutter speed that's brief enough to provide everything sharp in the frame. I love the action here, the amount of dirt that's been kicked up as the horse comes around the corner, the expression on the rider's face and on the horse's face. And this is caught at just the optimum moment in time, plus the additional information here to tell us, yeah, this is a rodeo event. So I like this composition very much. I think maybe we could increase exposure just a little bit, or perhaps contrast a little bit. This is arena lighting, I'm sure. And if we boost contrast just a small amount, it might enable the dark clothing and hat of the rider to stand out from the background a little bit. As it is, it scores very high. It gets a score of 5 for composition, 5 for impact, and 5 for technical expertise.
Crowned the first barrel by Maxie Adams, 15 points. Teton Dreams.
This is a very good composition taken at Oxbow Bend in Grand Teton National Park. It's one of the most spectacular landscape locations in the American West, and certainly one of the most often photographed. And you can understand why by just looking at this particular image. It's got everything going for it. It's got the color of fall. It's got beautiful mountains in the background and the waterway, plus the birds on the water here that we see in the foreground. I see a couple of things that are slightly distractive to me. The exact merger here with the shoreline and the left edge of the frame, that's slightly unfortunate. Also, the way this mountain here on the far left is almost cut through the very top of it. And more ideally, you might want the frame on the left to come through a position like this on the mountain range. So when you look at landscapes like this, you really need to think about how your subject is framed and choose your focal length wisely and your position wisely as well. This may be slightly overpowering, perhaps just moving slightly more to the left would have taken care of this bush being taller than the rest and kind of occluding the view that we have in this area here. Another thing I see is that the mountains don't stand out very well, and I suspect that could be from smoke during the fall season. I don't know if it was this year or previous years, but we don't see the peaks in their normal brilliance, and that's unfortunate. Perhaps the use of a polarizing filter might have helped here, but nonetheless, it's still a very powerful image and one I'd be very proud to have myself. I score this one highly, composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 4 as well.
Teton Dreams by Steve Shining, 12 points. Teton Gold.
Well, this is a panorama of the Grand Teton region, taken not far from the previous image. This one is taken from the parking lot of the next pullout that's just east of the previous parking lot location at Oxbow Bend, about a quarter mile to the east. I believe that's Highway 191. And it's a very nice panorama. I like what has been done here very much. The trees are just at their peak in terms of brilliance and the right amount of gold, and I like that a lot. The foreground here is handled very nicely. I don't care for how tall Signal Mountain appears here on the left. I would prefer that this would be more minimized, and I also don't care to see the highway over here on the right. I think if we crop up through here somewhere and perhaps crop up through here, or maybe even more tightly, maybe way over to here, we would come away with a stronger image. And I'm going to try and do that here. I'll see if I can move the image now. I believe I have to go in 2 steps on this one. So I'll move it over to something like this. So now we've taken care of those complications. The mountains are taller. We still all have this wonderful foliage in the foreground, and we don't see compositional elements that are distractive. Another thing you might consider would be to moving to the right in this composition just slightly, so that Mount Moran might appear over the notch in the trees here to really make the mountain look more imposing. So nonetheless, a very nice image. This one I scored highly, composition 3, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
Teton Gold by Tim Lesser, 11 points. Twisted.
Well, Ginger and I looked at this for a long time last night. We looked at it for so long that I think our minds became twisted. But I really like it a lot. It just provides so much to look at here, and it's all very appealing. I like very much the subject interest here, where all of these orange features come together, is right in the upper right-hand third. And that makes it very strong. I like the lighting on all of these twisted elements. That's done very well. I have no idea what I'm looking at here. I suspect these could be electrical wires, just judging from what I see here with the black part on the insulation. It may not be. But then look at all of these bubbles here. I find this very intriguing. I like very much how the bubbles provide you with different information as you look at them. They're all different based on their proximity to the different twisted elements that you look at here. So the orange on black, I really like this composition. I don't have any suggestions on how to improve it. Compositionally, I rank it as a 5, impact 4, and technical expertise 5.
Twisted by John Lepper, 14 points. And our last entry in the general color is white-faced capuchin.
Well, I like this image very much, as I have most of the images in this particular section. This is very powerful. I love the spotlighting on the subject's face here. That's just wonderful, and it appears in the upper right-hand third of the vertical frame. The trunks are both very supportive. The background is generally not distractive, although this part of this particular feature is just a little bit bright right above the head. But I don't detract from that in any way. I think also that this is slightly back focused. As I look at this, the sharpest of all of the image is right here. And as we come toward the camera, it falls off slightly on the face and the eyes of the primate. That's a little unfortunate. And also, perhaps the use of some flash fill here would help us out to make the right-hand side of the subject a little bit brighter. But as it is, we still see detail in here, so I'm not going to cut off dramatically for that. There's really nothing distractive here. You might work on these brighter spots here in the upper left just a little bit, but as it is, it's a very wonderful image. So I score this one, composition 5, impact 5, technical expertise 4.
White-faced capuchin by Tony Horpel, 14 points. Okay, so now it's time to move on to general monochrome, from which we've got 3 entries. Our first one is abstract.
Well, this is an abstract, certainly. It's very interesting. It displays very high repetition of form. I feel, however, that it lacks from a very specific subject. And as I look around, I can't really identify anything that I would like to put in an upper or lower third of the composition. So I think that's a negative. Also, the tonal range in this monochrome is slightly abbreviated. In other words, the whites aren't bright white and the darks aren't jet black. That's typically how you prefer to present monochrome images. Nevertheless, I score this one composition 3, impact 2, and technical expertise 2.
Abstract by Don Burnell, 7 points. Next, we have Anastasia on canvas.
Well, this monochrome displays a great rendition of the subject. There are great technical aspects of the image, namely the sharp focus in the plane of the eyes as we look at the person here. You can see the sharpest focus is right in this region. And that's very great for this type of a composition. The framing is ideal. You see there's nice room around the model or the person. I like how this is framed. It gives us an edge to the darker background here, which otherwise would be ambiguous. It's a great composition. I like this one. Composition 5, impact 4, and technical expertise 5.
Anastasia on Canvas by John Klikas, 14 points. And finally, we've got Balance by, oh, I'm sorry, Balance.
Well, I like the choice of subjects in this composition very much. As a petroleum geologist, I always enjoyed working with rocks, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. These balanced rocks are striking in how they are positioned. Unfortunately, I see that there's movement on this image because we see an indication of blurring around the outline of most of the rocks that we're looking at. And that's unfortunate. Also, the front stack of rocks is the only one that's really acceptably sharp. The other two fall away quite rapidly in terms of focus. And I think the background here with all of the bright lights in the back is distractive as well. So I score this one, composition 3, impact 2, and technical expertise 2.
Balance by Tamara McGee, 7 points. Okay, so at this point, we normally take a break, Dan. So for now, we're gonna take a 10-minute break. And
Okay.
meantime, I guess we can open up if people want to socialize, they can do so. But for myself, I'm gonna take a drink or get a
Sounds
drink.
good.
I'll see you in, right now, it's 7:43. We'll see you at 7:53.
Okay, thank you.
Heading into our main event for the evening, our subject
Show the.
for the month, which is liquid, right? Liquidity.
Share. Yes.
Okay, you ready, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're about to see 24 really great images of the digital subject color category tonight, which, as Dennis mentioned, is liquid. And you're going to be amazed at the quality of these images. Ginger and I spend a lot of time each summer and at other times of the year photographing waterbirds from different watercraft. And so having the subject be liquid was real appealing to me. And so I must say this collection of images, which I am about to critique, were very striking and very powerful and very appealing to me. So we'll start in on the first image, which is abstract liquid.
Okay,
And,
our first entry is abstract liquid.
and here we see a carefully created arrangement of blossoms in liquid in this vase. This is a very simple, but at the same time, very elegant composition. The layering of the various colors and various colors of the blossoms here really adds appeal. And I don't find any distractions in this composition. And I would say the larger white blossom located right in this vicinity here is suitable as the center of interest. I give this composition 4, impact 3, and technical expertise 4.
Abstract liquid by Don Burnell, 7 points. An abrupt change of direction. I'm sorry, abstract liquid by Nancy Wagner. My apologies. Nancy Wagner, 11 points. So next one is an abrupt change of direction.
Well, this is a great image of water crashing onto shoreline rocks. And the resulting spray here does indeed change directions very quickly of the water and the waves coming in. It's a nice pattern here that we see of the crashing wave. It is lit very strongly from the left-hand side. Unfortunately, that shades some of the spray, the water spray here. We can see kind of a shadow over it. So that takes away from the height of the particular water spray here. And that's a little unfortunate. I would suggest maybe we could crop in slightly on this image. We see a lot of extra space up here that, you know, kind of makes the wave itself look smaller. And at the same time, we have some rocks down here, which we could minimize just a little bit. So if we zoom in this amount and take a look at the scene now, we see that the splash is much taller. We still have the foreground rocks here, and we have a nice space that's left at the upper part here between the splash and the top of the frame. So I would prefer this composition. I give this score composition 4, impact 5, and technical expertise 4.
An abrupt change of direction by Tim Lesser, 13 points. Blushing Rose.
Well, here is another very simple composition that has high appeal. The carefully created setting in the snow here I like very much. The way the light comes in from the back here through the glass provides us with this little focus sparkle here in the snow. I like very much what we can see in the rosé part of the glass itself. We can see the inverted sunlight here, the inverted horizon in the background here, and then the light coming across the snowfield here from behind toward us. All of that is really nice information. I like how this is slightly off-centered and fairly close to the upper left-hand third of the composition. Sharp focus runs right through the stem of the glass, and the glass is sharply in focus. And then the foreground is all sharp and the background fades away acceptably. Sorry about that, as we see here in the background. So I see no distractions at all in this composition. I don't mind all the bright specular highlights that we see that are rendered out of focus here. I like this composition very much. Composition is a 4 on this one, impact is a 4, and technical expertise is a 4.
Blushing Rose by Lori Pence, 12 points. Cannon Hill Park.
Well, this image shows us very dramatic light on probably what's near sunrise of Cannon Hill Park, which is up on South Hill in Spokane. It's a place that's very idyllic in its location. I like this very much. I like how we can see detail in all of the shaded area here, and we still can see detail in the brighter parts of the clouds in the background. Unfortunately, we can't see all of the trunk of this tree here, so it kind of looks like it's slightly hanging and not attached to the ground on this side. I would prefer to see the base itself, and perhaps going over about this far would be required to bring that into the frame. I also don't like how this tree is bisected right down through the middle here. And I would suggest we could crop right through there or turn the camera such that we could see the entirety of this feature itself. I like how the sitting bench is visible here in the background. And one thing that I might comment on, there's actually 10 different ducks on this water surface. Unfortunately, none of them are in the brighter part of the reflection on the lake, except for this one, which is right here. The others are concentrated in this region right here. And we can't see them well because they're not in this region right here. So if we'd had at least a few ducks in here, that would provide more appeal for this particular setting. And perhaps waiting a few minutes or a few hours or whatever, of course, then the light would be totally different. But it's a great composition, a great location. Composition 3 on this, impact 4, and technical expertise 3.
Cannon Hill Park by Kim Barbie, 10 points.
No, I didn't say that so much. That's interesting.
Chocolate Milk.
This is a great close-up image with high impact and high action both. I'm guessing that a flash with very small duration was used to capture the exact moment here of the splash. I like very much the droplets that are flying out from this splash. And the actual arrangement here of the splash is like something you never would see unless you could stop the action right at this peak moment. And I think the maker has done an extremely good job at doing that. I like how the composition has been framed. We see just a little bit of room all the way around the subject material that we're looking at here. I think that's very powerful. The lighting is very good. It's not overexposed or underexposed, which is often hard to manipulate when you're doing macro work like this. So I think this is a really great image. Composition 5, impact 5, and technical expertise 5 as well.
Chocolate Milk by Dennis Isip, 15 points. Next is Coastal Reflections.
Well, this is a very moody composition. The water on the shoreline creates a great lead-in line to the background here. I like very much coastal scenes like this, and it's just a glorious image that we're looking at here. A lot of wonderful things to look at. I like very much that the horizon line here is absolutely perfectly straight. That's something that Ginger and I deal with constantly when we're working on photography of water birds and water. And frequently we have to straighten out our images. So that's one thing we look at very carefully. And this composition does very well there. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of detail here in the background. It's all shaded. Perhaps just a little more exposure would help out there. Perhaps resorting to HDR techniques would help to maintain visibility in the dark shaded areas and also preserve detail in the bright white of the clouds as we see it here. But overall, it's a very nice image. I score this one composition 4, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
Coastal Reflections by Elaine Guidoni, 10 points. Elliott Bay.
Well, this is quite a striking composition that we're looking at here. As we look at different features of Elliott Bay in the Seattle area, this is the old roof of the old Kingdome, which used to be the Seattle Mariners baseball field, indoor stadium, up until the year 2000. So we know this image was made before 2000 and perhaps made with slide film, more than likely. But anyway, one comment I have here is that we would probably like to see a little more exposure in the scene. That way we can see the mast of the sailboat rather stand out a little more from the background clouds. I like very much how the moonlight comes toward us here that we're seeing. So essentially we have the Kingdome, the moonlight reflection, and the sailboat silhouette here in the foreground. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a merger here between compositional elements. And I would prefer to move slightly to the left to put the Kingdome more over here and put the sailboat more over here so that we have some separation there and things are not compacted toward the center. Also, there may be a slight lack of sharpness here, but understandably with a slow shutter speed as is required, you probably wouldn't be able to achieve that. Anyway, I scored this one composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3 as well.
Elliott Bay by Butch Shop, 9 points. Grand Prismatic.
Well, Grand Prismatic, I feel, is the crowning thermal feature in Yellowstone Park. And most descriptions that you see of it or hear of it state that as well. It's just magnificent. It's a very large thermal feature, a large dome of minerals that have built up from this hot spring over the thousands of years that it's been there. I like this image very much. I like the strong lead-in line that we have with this particular color of the algae that we see in the hot water. And I'm told that the water coming out of this particular thermal feature is at 160 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's warm indeed. I like the fact that we can see a lot of the mountain in the background. Sometimes this is so steamy, like in early morning, that you really can't see clouds or any of the landscape behind the thermal features. So this has been taken at an opportune time. I love the saturation of the colors that we're looking at here. I love the fact that this landscape shows us tack sharp from the very beginning of the composition all the way through. And I like this composition very much. So I scored this one, composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
Grand Prismatic by Tamara McGee, 12 points. Inferno.
Well, this is another composition of Grand Prismatic Spring. And unfortunately, this one has that condition I was talking about where there is so much steam that comes off the top of the water surface there that it just occludes all of the scenery behind. And that's usually in the early part of the morning before the atmosphere is warmed up enough so that that's not the situation. We don't have that strong lead-in line here. We have a suggestion of a lead-in line here, but it's not presented large enough or striking enough in this composition, I think, to qualify as a strong lead-in line. So I prefer the other rendition of Grand Prismatic over this one. If you look carefully, you can see footprints of wildlife as they walk through these features. You can see some of those here in various parts of the substrate. So on this one, I scored composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3 as well.
Inferno by Courtney Litwin, 9 points. Lehardy's Rapids.
Well, the Hardy's Rapids is located a little bit north of Fishing Bridge, which most people know about in Yellowstone. And it's on the Yellowstone River, and it's essentially the first drop in elevation of the Yellowstone River as it leaves Yellowstone Lake. Forms Lehardy's Rapids. They're very famous. It's an area where you frequently will see water birds like common mergansers, common golden eyes, Barrow's golden eyes, and a few other species over time. This particular composition I like a lot. I really do. I like how the water is veiled with the slower shutter speed. I like the choice of the rock feature that it is surrounding. It's very striking, very strong composition, and I score this one very highly. Composition 5, impact 5, technical expertise 5.
Lehardy's Rapids by Rosemary Biziar, 15 points. Lily Pond.
Well, this is an image of yellow pond lily. It's vegetation that we see commonly in freshwater lakes in the country. And it's pretty ubiquitous on the lakes that we frequent. We see a lot of it, and this suggests that this is probably, sometime in early part of June, I'm guessing, based on the blossoms and the age of the leaves that we're looking at, perhaps mid-June or maybe even late June. But as I look at this, I struggle to see a real definitive subject of interest other than this small blossom here. I would like to see something a little bit larger, perhaps a loon right here or something that might help us out with that. And it also has this overall bluish color cast as it reflects light from the sky, but it does so in a way that it's kind of reminiscent of a lot of the scans that I created in the past of slide film. I don't know if that's the case here, but the color rendition that I'm looking at is not quite accurate, and I suggested it might be a scan from slide film. But anyway, we'll score it as it appears. I give this one composition 2, impact 2, and technical expertise 2.
Lily Pond by Butch Shop, 6 points. Liquid Color.
Well, I think this is part of a stream channel in Glacier National Park. And if so, we may be looking at the Precambrian aged Apakuni Formation here in the foreground. You can see this is old metamorphosed sedimentary rock that we're looking at here. We can see the layering, horizontal layering, still very obvious, even though it has been slightly metamorphosed. Really old rocks that we're looking at here, 1.2 to 1.4 billion years in age. And you can see the erosive power of water as it comes down through this stream. It has cut away a lot of the rock material here that we're looking at, and has left us with this scene in present day. As I'm looking at this, there's a lot going on here. I see more than one composition that I think could be zoomed in upon and perhaps be rendered as stronger compositions. One right here in the center, perhaps one here in the background. As it is, we've got interest here, interest here, interest here as well. And so it kind of suffers from that because it's a little hard to determine precisely which is the main subject of interest. So I think a really nice horizontal could be made right here. And perhaps a slow shutter speed image could be made back here in the upper right, something like that. But anyway, it's a pleasing rendition nonetheless of a great geologic feature. And I scored this composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
Liquid Color by Steve Whitaker, 9 points. Liquid Life.
Well, I can tell you right now, this is one image I really appreciate. I love everything that I'm looking at here. The green on green of the toads and the water vegetation is just very striking. I like the placement of the two subjects, the two toads here that we see in the bottom right. They're aligned in the same direction, giving us wonderful agreement with the two subjects. I like the water droplets a lot on the leaves that we're looking at here. This one doesn't have many of the water droplets left because it's tilted enough for all of that to run off and not form. I like the fact that we have adequate depth of field from the very front here all the way on through the composition. By the time we get back here, it's okay to be out of focus slightly. Not a problem at all in the far background. The framing is just idyllic in this particular image. Compositional elements have a nice amount of room around them. I like this composition very much. This probably was taken with a slow shutter speed, fairly small aperture, and as such we see just a slight bit of movement here on the front of this particular frog and this pond leaf that he's pushing against. But if you didn't know about that ahead of time and see it on an iMac 5K, you might not know that was a problem at all. So it's such a minor feature, I'm not going to detract from the score whatsoever. So on this one, it gets 5s for composition and impact and technical expertise.
Sorry, I was muted. Excuse me. Liquid Life by Beverly Hardin, 15 points. Mammoth Hot Springs.
Well, this is a wonderful view of the travertine that's being deposited at Mammoth Hot Springs. That's a mineral comprised mainly of calcium carbonate. And it's got some impurities in it that are algae, as well as a certain amount of iron content in the water that's dissolving the Mission Canyon Formation, which is upslope from this particular feature. If you stand at the road to the right of what we're looking at here and look uphill, you'll see the Mission Canyon cliffs, the limestone cliffs above you. And as hot water percolates down through those and comes through the rocks and dissolves a certain amount of that limestone, it brings that saturated water to this region. And as it cools, it allows it to precipitate and form the unusual features that we're looking at here. And I find these, as they're presented, very striking. The maker has chosen a really nice location of the hot springs to zoom in on tightly and give us a wonderful view from upper left to lower right. I appreciate that a lot. There's nothing distractive in this image. As you look at Mount Everts over here on the right-hand side, this is an area where I've had a tremendous amount of luck in the past, right on this slope right here, photographing battling bighorn sheep in the fall and early winter, and also back on this ridge right here. Just a great place for that. As well as down along the Gardner River down here, you see bighorn sheep pretty frequently in that part of northern Yellowstone. As we look on farther into the background here, this is the drainage of the Yellowstone River as it comes out of the northeast part of the park, below the upper and lower Grand Falls of the Yellowstone, and it goes right through the town of Gardner. So a very wonderful part of the world, in my opinion. I enjoy that area very much. This particular composition gets a score of 5. The impact is 5, and technical expertise is 5 as well.
Mammoth Hot Springs by Courtney Litwin, 15 points. Moving with the Flow.
Well, this is an intriguing composition taken with a slow shutter speed to veil the appearance of the waterfall. I like that very much. I like the fact that you can see water coming from farther behind up on the slope there, coming out of the forest and all the way down to the foreground here. I like very much that we can see detail in all of the shaded areas here surrounding the actual bottom of the waterfall. I think that's been handled very nicely. The exposure chosen, and perhaps high dynamic range techniques were used here to give us more view in the shadows and to still preserve the bright whites in the waterfall itself. I think this is a slightly distractive element of the composition here. It tends to rob the interest away from the waterfall. It's leaning out of the frame, and it also has some out of focus branches here that are moving because of the wind during the longer exposure. So this is a distraction from the composition as far as I'm concerned. So I score this one, composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 3.
Moving with the Flow by Harvey Brown, 11 points. Natural Hot Tubs.
Well, this is one of my favorite images in the competition this evening. It is just absolutely striking. I love everything I'm looking at here. I like the fact that at this moment in time, there's an appreciable amount of hot water coming out of the geyser and the hot springs. I like how we're looking at perfect focus all the way from the near foreground, all the way back through it. It carries way out beyond the thermal feature as well. I like the storm clouds in the background. I like how the water is just perfectly framed near the top of the frame here. And on the sides, we see just a perfect expression of this thermal feature. I believe this is in Yellowstone National Park. I think I know where it is, but I don't remember the exact name of it. So I'll have to get out my book and look that one up. Some people might make the case for, we have 2 compositions here, one in the foreground and one in the background. But I think the complementary colors that we're looking at here really create a strong unity in the two areas. The greens that we see here are matched by the greens that we have here. So I think it's all intact, it's all wonderful, and I score everything a 5 on composition, impact, and technical expertise.
Natural Hot Tubs by Donna Larson, 15 points. OMG.
Well, there's really dynamic action portrayed here. This young gal who's just been surprised by a spray of water is probably saying, "Oh my God," and it looks like a total surprise. I like the fact that she is entirely sharp in focus. I see no blurring whatsoever. We see some movement on the water droplets here in various parts that are nearer the camera, and I don't see that as a problem at all in this particular feature. What we see is just a big blast of water on this subject, and the way the water is presented here, I think, is all constructive. For this one, I scored composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
OMG by John Lepper, 12 points. Prismatic Blues.
Well, I believe this is another part of Grand Prismatic Spring. It gives us this overall blue rendition, which is a reflection from the sky and clouds above. And I like that part of it. The overall blue tone, I think, is something we typically don't see in compositions from Grand Prismatic. I like all of the step downs that we see here as mineralization forms these distinct pools, as the different colors of algae, which respond to the different temperatures of the water, presents slightly different tonalities here. We don't see any strong lead-in line here on the composition. We also don't see a strong center of interest. So those are minor distractions in this particular composition. For this one, I score composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 3.
Prismatic Blues by Steve Shining, 9 points. Raincatcher.
Well, this is a very pleasing image. I like very much the strong pattern that's created here. The triangle between the 3 dominant blossoms that we're looking at. I think that is very well composed, very well focused. All 3 of those are just absolutely tack sharp. And then the others just fall away as they may, because they're not really the subjects of interest. They're just supportive information in the overall composition. The framing has been handled very nicely, except for the one exception I see right here, where this petal has been slightly cropped along with its water droplet right at the top of the frame there. And if there's more information on the raw part of this particular file, I would try to move that upper part of the frame up just slightly to include all of that petal. And then I wouldn't have a single compositional complaint about this. As it is, it scored well, composition 4, impact 4, and technical expertise 4.
Raincatcher by Lori Carlton Smith, 12 points. Oops. Yeah, I'm good. Everybody heard me, right? Okay, next is Ripple Effect.
Well, we see good patterns here in the ripples on the water surface and the arrangement of the fish here in the pond. Unfortunately, the reflections are so strong that it's hard for us to really look into the pond to see in more detail on the fish that we're looking at here. I find that some of the information here is slightly different in theme than the main part of what we're looking at, which is above this line. So I would be tempted to crop off the base of this entirely. And I would suggest the use of a polarizing filter in this situation. It might have rendered things a little better by eliminating some of the reflective qualities of the water surface. It's framed nicely. We have a similar amount of space around the key elements in the composition here. And I scored this one, composition 3, impact 2, and technical expertise 2.
Ripple Effect by Gene Alleman, 7 points. Splash and Foam.
Well, this is a great location, I presume, along the Pacific Ocean. You see ice plant here on the shoreline, and a nice arrangement of the compositional elements that we're looking at here. I think these are slightly distractive in the upper left-hand part here and could have been cropped away. And another complication I see with this image is that there appears to be movement throughout. As I looked at this carefully on my 27-inch iMac, I could see movement on virtually everything in the image. And so I think it suffers from camera movement during exposure. So that's unfortunate. As such, I've scored at composition 2, impact 2, and technical expertise 2.
Splash and Foam by Barbara Murray, 6 points. Squall.
Well, this is a very strong composition. I love everything I'm looking at here. The squall in the background makes this totally appropriately named. I like the fact that there's this nice diagonal between that squall back here, the very darker part of it, and the boat on the shoreline. I love the lines that are created by the water on the shoreline here, which lead us way into the background here. The exposure is absolutely perfect. The framing is perfect. The composition is perfect. The color and the moodiness that I'm looking at, everything is perfect on this composition, and it's one of my favorites in the competition tonight. And this gets a score of 5 on everything: composition, impact, and technical expertise.
Squall by Tony Herpel, 15 points. Too Much Liquid.
Well, this looks like the result of too much imbibing over the election. And I can see here that it looks like the Riesling won out. It's totally empty. And we still have a full quantity of Merlot here. In fact, it still has the cork. So maybe that would be appropriate for later tonight, as we still don't know the outcome of the election. But it's amazing what I'm looking at here. The maker has done very well on contriving this composition, and it just shows me incredible ingenuity and inventiveness on this composition. I like this a lot. It's just, it's a great idea, and it's implemented absolutely perfectly. And so this one scores very highly as well. I like the chair being over here because it gives us something to look at instead of what's dark in the background there. All of these other features in the background are all complementary to what we're looking at here. And the only thing we don't see is the guy tipped over on the table that drank all the wine. But anyway, I like this composition very much. I scored it composition 4, composition 5, impact 4, and technical expertise 5.
Too Much Liquid by Sister Madonna, 14 points. And our last entry in the color is Warholesque Lake.
Well, here we have an interesting montage of a good composition on the shoreline here. And we have 4 different types of filtration, I think, that we're looking at here. We see strikingly different outcomes of the different types of filtration. At least I think that's what I'm looking at here, because as I recall some of my black and white days, I think you could create some of these things with different filters and using infrared photography and so on. So it's not wildlife, so I'm not a technical expert at what we're looking at here, but I would love to know. And so perhaps in some of the dialogue following, we could get some information on this particular one. I scored this composition 4, impact 3, and technical expertise 5.
Warlesque Lake by Kim Barbie, 12 points. Okay, so at this point, before we move on to our last category, Lynn, you have an announcement?
Yes, next week, the 11th, Tamara McGee will be giving her light bloom class, and everybody is invited. And she has some good techniques and will show us the befores and the afters and how to get from one to the other. So 7 o'clock, same time, same place.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to subject monochrome. We have 3 entries. Our first one is Evening Shadows.
Well, this is a wonderful composition. I love the sweeping lines that the different water lines present here on the shoreline. These are just fabulous. It lead us back into the other part of the composition here. I like how we can see the 2 figures that are walking along the beach right here. I like the presentation of the background hillsides and smaller mountains in the background. The horizontal line in the composition is absolutely horizontal, which is very good. The tonal information in the black and white monochrome here has a wide range, which is something you strive for in black and white photography. There's only 2 distractions, the antennas here on the hillside and the apartment buildings or some type of buildings over here on the left. But they're not well lit, and for all practical purposes, we can say they're not even there. Very strong composition. I like this one a lot. I call composition 4 on this, impact 5, and technical expertise 5.
Evening Shadows by Elaine Guidoni, 14 points. Shifting Seasons.
Well, I enjoy the repetition of form that we're looking at here with the bridge supports that move on in the background there. I also appreciate that we don't have the actual bridge structure up above here to form a distraction from what we're looking at down here in the bottom part on the composition itself. We see a large expanse of water here that's open water and does not have ice on it. The framing around that, I think, is a very nice pattern. I like the fact that we have a little bit of ice here all along the bottom part of the composition to provide us a base for the composition. I like the tonal qualities in this monochrome. We see that there are deep blacks and bright whites, which suggests that there's good tonal range in this composition. I'm not sure what the verticals are. Maybe those are street lights or something that are reflected from up above. But it's a very nice composition. So this is called Shifting Seasons, and I scored composition 4, impact 4, technical expertise 5.
Shifting Seasons by Sister Madonna, 13 points. And our final entry for the evening is S. Plash.
Well, the form of the splash that comes out of the bottle here is very intriguing, and it forms a nice pattern. I like very much how the bottle is tilted slightly instead of being vertical, which would have been very static in presentation in this composition. So we have a really nice striking S-curve here, which is very attractive from an art standpoint. We see the separation between the actual spray here of the splash and the background. There's nothing in the background that's distractive. It forms a really strong monochrome image. Notice how everything is tack sharp. There's no subject movement whatsoever here. Focus is perfect throughout. We're focusing on a flat plane here as we're looking at this, and it's all been done very well. So I score this composition 3, impact 3, and technical expertise 5.
S-Splash by Dennis Isip, 11 points. And that's a wrap for this evening. So Daniel, thank you very much again for all the hard work that you've done for tonight.
Well,
Yes,
thank
thank
you,
you.
Dennis, and thank you, everyone. I've enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun. And I say thank you to all of you that provided such wonderful images. I really enjoy looking at them and critiquing them. And I hope we all learned a little bit. I certainly did from looking at them and listening to some of the discussion from you. I think they were all fabulous in creation. And
Let's give Dan a hand. for
yes.
Thank
coming,
you very
and
much.
I'd like to look forward to
Thank
next
you.
time.
Okay, thank you very much. We do look forward to 2 weeks from now when we will be critiquing prints. And Ginger and I look forward to when we can all meet together again, and perhaps we will visit your camera club and provide you with the program in the future. We would enjoy doing that. So thank all of you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, all you photographers. See you next time.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.